Hey folks, welcome back to my channel Relationship Haven. I hope you all are having a wonderful day or evening. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Now, let's get into today's story. My wife, 28, of 2 years, has done a complete 180 in the past few weeks. She went from someone who was loving, focused on starting a family, and completely trustworthy to someone who has lied, deceived me, and blames me for her infidelity. It all started 3 weeks ago. I was riding high. I thought our relationship was going great. We were talking about getting another dog and our honeymoon plans since the pandemic wrecked the initial plans. Then Friday hit. I could sense something was up and even mentioned it to my mother on the phone. I don't know what's going on. I just have a bad feeling about my wife, I said. Then that night she texted me, I just need some space tonight. I know you won't like it, but please respect my decision. She then proceeded to turn off her phone and she said she slept in her car in a vacant lot. When she came home I was understanding but stern that this sort of thing could never happen again. But she had completely changed her mindset on life itself. She wanted no kids and wanted out of the relationship. The most telling thing she said was, I fear that we will cheat on each other in the future. Many things happened since then, including her leaving the state for 2 weeks because she needed space. Last night I found that she had spent the night at her instructor's house after going to a movie theater. I also found a picture of the two of them. The worst part is I was the one who had encouraged her in this career and she never would have met the guy if I hadn't introduced them. I have yet to confront her, but I am currently putting all the puzzle pieces together about this whole situation. She is basically blaming me for all these issues that we are suddenly dealing with, saying she doesn't like the way I talk to her, that I'm controlling, and that I call her names. I have done deep soul searching these past few weeks to try and understand what I could have done to cause this, but her accusations are unfounded. I encouraged her to get mental health help, which in her mind equated to calling her names. I stressed the importance of communication when she shut off her phone, but she said that is controlling even though I didn't stop her from spending 3+ weeks away from home. Finally she had these recordings of me without my knowledge and thought that they were proof that I mentally abused her. I played these for my counselor and he disagreed that there was any sort of abuse in the recordings and was actually impressed with how calm and collected I was in the discussion. Anyways, none of these things are excuses for cheating and the way she has been treating me. I guess I am at the investigation stage still, trying to let her make her own choices while I gather the data. It's tough though, and the person I once loved more than anything has completely wrecked our entire life together in 3 short weeks. I am at a loss for words about how I feel right now. I've got a great support system and loving parents, but now I know how heartbreak feels and I never want to feel this way again. Update. Finally had a discussion with my wife, but she insisted her parents be in the room. We talked and she was nasty to me and showed not one bit of remorse or empathy even when I broke down and spilled my heart out to her. The next day she went to my house and I finally was able to be alone with her. I confronted her about the inappropriate relationship and she again got her parents involved and her mom defended the affair with ridiculous excuses. Currently no contact with her, but I have seen a change. The shift has happened. I went 180 on her after I found out about the affair and she has started to flounder. Her parents came to town last Wednesday and I finally was able to get her to have a discussion with me. I decided against revealing the affair with her parents in the room, but I caught her in multiple lies in our discussion. My tone was calm and very apologetic for the things she accused me of. The discussion was very hurtful as she essentially said that ever since the day we got married I hadn't treated her right and she had wanted out. She never mentioned this to me during our entire relationship until now. She continued to accuse me of essentially emotionally abusing her by twisting my words from our previous discussions, and luckily my mother was there. She ended up calling her out on her lies because my mom was in some of those discussions she was referencing. The two biggest things that kept me strong through the discussion were 1, not expecting any sort of reconciliation or remorse, and 2, having a plan of attack for the encounter. I wanted to publicly in front of her parents reveal how childish and mentally unfit she was when she was making these wild accusations while protecting my character, and stress to her father the need to get her to a therapist or counselor and have her work on her issues. The discussion ended with my wife storming out of the room with her mother. Her father stayed behind me and my mom. His emotions were genuine and very telling about the whole situation. He sat there and the first words out of his mouth were a tearful "I'm sorry, man." A father looking for answers as well. He told me that it hurt because he considered me his son and that he always would. This obviously made me very emotional as I told him I loved your daughter and I just want her to be healthy, but at this point I just need to let her go. I told him about the affair and what I knew, and he understood where I was coming from. I stressed the need for her to have consequences for her actions as she has had none so far. Even further, I stressed the need for her to see a therapist, and he said he agreed and that he has been trying to get her to go but to no avail. Because of my two goals above, even though this discussion was not all peaches, it satisfied what I went there to do, and I actually felt much better knowing that I had a father-in-law who understood what was going on. Then the next day came. I went home from work and my wife was moving some of her things out of the house. I wanted to be there so that I could make sure she didn't steal anything of mine. I actually fixed a part on her car and we had a calm talk about her future plans. She told me she was going to keep working for how much time she has left the job. I can't believe they are keeping her around. She said she was going to try and earn her ratings and wanted to become a flight instructor. I asked where she was going to live and she said an RV park. My parents are going to give me their RV. At that point I told her I just don't understand why you were doing all this. It doesn't make any sense. She said I'm just so happy at the place where she works. I then asked, I just want to know, are you having an inappropriate relationship with AP? She wouldn't look me in the eye. She said no, of course not. I told her I knew and had evidence. I mentioned a couple of events. What were you doing last Wednesday night? Who do you talk to for 90 minutes at 11 p.m. when you were at a bachelorette party in June? I then showed her the call history and she actually openly showed me it was AP's number in her phone by typing it out, but she kept deflecting the accusation. I stayed strong and calm and told her it would get easier if she told the truth. I was witnessing a 28-year-old woman acting like a child who was just caught in a lie. The real kicker came when she asked if I wanted to get her parents involved. I questioned why she would do that, but I said okay. Immediately before I even showed any evidence, her mom started making excuses for her daughter. Maybe it was a call and this was already after you were having problems. Wasn't it? No, it wasn't. I calmly said to her mother, can you look at this objectively and tell me there was no inappropriate relationship going on? Her mom refused to answer and said I was trying to manipulate her into saying something just like I manipulated her daughter. When they ran out of excuses, all three of them stormed out of my house and her mom said, I hope you don't treat the next girl like you did my daughter. What a screwed up family dynamic. Her dad said nothing the whole time, but I could see he was absolutely beside himself in dealing with both of them. Eventually my wife sent a text to me saying AP is one of my very best friends. I was really hurting and we were separated at the time. No, we weren't. She basically admitted to the cheating. She said she wanted to talk with me about it with her lawyer in the room. I told her that I wouldn't recommend getting lawyers involved, seeing as she had committed multiple felonies by recording me without my consent. I haven't talked to her since Thursday, but the dynamics of the situation have been hugely shifted and I couldn't have done it without the help of everyone here. This is the last thing I'll mention and it is probably pretty helpful in terms of where to go next. I noticed Sunday morning she went to church. She hasn't gone with me in a while, but we used to go all the time and then took about 500-mile drive to nowhere and then went back to her place. She hasn't done any suspicious activity either out of caution now or realization of her transgressions. I do actually believe the fact that she didn't have sex, but it doesn't matter because I already have enough info and don't need any more. I have already filed for divorce and she will be getting served within a week or two. Update. Alright, so a big part of my story has been the dog we share. About 2 weeks ago I let her take care of our dog and honestly, I just needed a break. I worked full-time and our dog was really struggling with his separation anxiety, and I was too. Anyway, she recently returned our dog back to me full of fleas and asked if I would watch him again. Of course I said I would, but we had a good conversation that followed this. If you remember from my story, she cheated on me with her flight instructor and I was financially and educationally supporting her in her flying since I am already a pilot. I have my suspicions that her rationale for cheating was that she began struggling while flying and her instructor likely said something along the lines of you should pay more so you can fly more often because she asked me for more money to fly more often. Mind you, she was already flying 3 hours a week, which is around $750 a week. I'm sure when I put my foot down and said it wasn't the right move for our family, she decided she could just sleep her way into free lessons. Anyway, she told me I was controlling, manipulative, and a narcissist for not spending more money so she could achieve her dream. Childish, right? Fast forward to our discussion last Friday. I asked her how flying was going and she said she quit flying because it was too expensive and she needed to get my mind right. So she gave up on the entire reason she destroyed our marriage, and I have my suspicions that she and AP are not seeing each other anymore either because she mentioned that she was staying on a pull-out bed in-house with 6 people and 2 dogs. She is staying with one of her co-workers who is 40-something and living with her parents after also recently getting divorced. In 2 short months my wife went from having an incredible life where she didn't have to work, had a husband that financed her flight training, and her own airplane we could fly whenever, to living in-house with 6 other people and working a job with which she could barely get by. Another dream that she gave up on was becoming a flight attendant at a major airline. She was actually called back to work in July and declined that opportunity. I asked her if she had reconsidered, but I have a lot of friends who work at the airline and she said she wouldn't feel comfortable if she ran into them while working. She still is without remorse and I think she still believes I caused her to do all this, but reality is hitting and it is striking her hard. I've encouraged her to seek mental health help without her lashing out at me, and we have agreed to amicably come to a divorce agreement outside of the court, so things are looking up for me in this situation. It was my birthday yesterday and I am really lucky to have a great family and friends who wished me the best and have been there for me throughout this. The funniest thing WS said to me was, "You can keep all our mutual friends." She knows she effed up big time and is embarrassed to be around people who will know what she did. I move across the country in a little over a month for the military and hopefully will be starting a great new life. I just hope my STBXW gets the treatment she needs because she is falling into an unrecoverable tailspin. Update. It's been a while since I've updated everyone, and man oh man has my life changed. I ended up moving to California and I have consistently gotten angrier and angrier at what she did. Now I'm not really blaming her BPD anymore, but more realizing how fallen of a human being she is. After some time and reflection, I came to see how terrible, deceitful, and traumatizing her behavior was to me. But after crying and being sad for a couple of months, I got my airplane back and started doing things I enjoy. I flew across the country with my dad, spent a few days in Vegas with some friends, did some snow skiing, and began a new job. I could finally enjoy life again, and in December a weight was lifted as we finally came to a divorce agreement through mediation. While I'm not ecstatic about having to pay her money, it's a small price to pay to remove her toxicity from my life forever. The biggest surprise came this week. I found out I got selected to start pilot training. I couldn't believe it. I had tried and failed multiple times before, but my perseverance paid off. I don't know what my life has in store next, but I know this relationship/divorce was a major hardship to prepare me for better times ahead. I say all this to hopefully inspire people who are going through hell right now that there's a reason why you're going through it, and eventually life does get better. I can't thank everyone on here enough for the support and encouragement through my toughest days. OP, as you said, she is not your responsibility anymore. She lost that privilege when she walked out on the marriage. If she is or was in that bad of a mental state, then her first step should have been to come to you or see a therapist. Instead, she looked to outside companions and in the process ruined her marriage. She is now responsible for herself, and that's the choice she made. She has her family and her new guy that can and will take care of her. You stand by your word, meet with her at the local park, let her spend some time with your dog, and that's it. Don't let her get to you during that time. This moment can develop in any direction. Maybe she will be absolutely not interested in you and just wants to see the dog. Maybe she will try to lure you to talk to her. Keep your stance up, keep your answers short, and always keep in mind how she treated you. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation. We were high school sweethearts, and as soon as we were 18 and had both graduated, we got married. We were warned by practically everybody we knew to avoid making the major commitment to each other until we had matured, but we knew that we loved each other, and there was no doubt in my mind that she was the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. There were times during college when both of us might have wished things were different. Being married meant that our social lives were a lot different from our peers. During the 4 years we were in school, we had our struggles, but we always managed to come back together and work through them. It was a stressful time, and I thought that it made us stronger than ever. Right out of school, both of us landed decent paying jobs. However, we were still new at living completely on our own, so it took some major adjusting to gain the financial stability that we needed to start our family. After a little while, we were eventually able to rent a nice house with a yard. We adopted a dog together, and we were preparing to start trying for a baby. Around Christmas time, I was shopping around for different gifts that I could get my wife. One thing she had always told me she was interested in doing was a boudoir shoot. It wasn't something that I ever asked her to do, but it was something that she'd seen some of her other friends doing, and she thought it was a fun idea. So I found a photographer online and bought a certificate for her. She was excited by the gift when she received it on Christmas morning, and it didn't take long for her to reach out to the photographer to schedule their appointment. Even though I was the one who bought the shoot, she wanted the actual pictures to be a surprise to me, so I didn't tag along during the shoot or have anything to do with it. The day for the shoot came along, and I'm not going to lie, I was pretty nervous. There was this random person who was going to be seeing my wife in an incredibly intimate setting, and I had some reservations about it, but she assured me before leaving that it was a professional she was working with and nothing would come of it. When she got back from the shoot, she was completely beaming. She loved being in front of the camera, and she kept telling me about how the photographer told her she was a complete natural. She was a very beautiful woman, so beautiful that people would ask her all the time if she was a model or if she planned on getting into the industry. At the time, she only thought it was meaningless compliments, but after the photo shoot, she started seriously considering it. If that's what she wanted, I was going to support her. A few weeks had passed, and the photographer reached back out to her to see if she wanted to participate in a free portfolio builder that he was offering just so he could try to get his name out there. My wife talked to me about it because she knew that I had my reservations during the boudoir shoot, but I knew nothing had happened then, so I was totally fine with it. She left and did the photo shoot. She even showed me some of the pre-edited pictures that he'd taken, and they were amazing. If he was going to try and help her get her portfolio together, I had no doubt in my mind that she would be booking gigs for runways and department stores, or whatever it is that models do. Several weeks had passed since she had done her first portfolio builder with the photographer, and she had done a few more with him since then. They were talking a lot more, and it seemed like it was mostly business related. I was a little bit weirded out by how frequently they were talking, and how she would sometimes step out of the room to take his calls, but I didn't want to be paranoid about the relationship. When I surprised my wife at the studio, I realized that I was right to be paranoid. I walked in, and I didn't see anything outright sexual going on between them. My wife was in her underwear modeling in a bed, but I kind of thought that might have been just for a specific type of shoot. I met the photographer, and he told me how wonderful it was to work with my wife. He even commented on how lucky I was to have somebody like her, which did rub me the wrong way. They were finishing up with their shoot, so he asked me if I could wait in the other room, and I agreed. When I was waiting, I noticed that he had a dark room in the same building. I have always been curious to be inside of one, so I let myself in. Hanging up on the strings to dry were dozens of pictures of my wife, alongside other women, and they were in compromising positions. There were nude photos of my wife, and alongside those were photos of her with the photographer in bed. I didn't know right away if they were photos that were being taken for some specific shoot, but she didn't tell me that she was in that position with him. The more I looked, the more I realized that there were pictures of them having sex. There was nothing professional about what I saw in those pictures. I could still hear them in the studio taking pictures, so I snagged a couple of them off the drying rope and put them in my bag. I picked my head back inside, trying to hold back my rage with everything in me. I just yelled at them that I had to go into the office and enjoy the rest of their time. I was fuming. She had been coming here under the guise of trying to start a career in modeling, but she was sleeping with the photographer. When I got back home, I instantly looked through their emails and saw countless messages between them. He was telling her that she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, how he had to be with her, etc. She never once mentioned how she thought it was wrong because she was married. She loved the attention he was giving her. I printed those emails and gathered all of the evidence that I could and put it in an envelope. I sacrificed what should have been the best years of my life being married to her, and she threw it all away as if it meant nothing. I was going to show her exactly how that made me feel. I managed to do some online sleuthing and found some of the other models he was sleeping with through his Instagram. I emailed some of them and their agents telling them that I was interested in hiring them for a fashion brand I was creating. I got a surprising amount of responses, and I invited all of them to meet me at the same time. My wife was one of those people. They all met me at a studio I rented, and the photographer that had been sleeping with my wife was also invited under the assumption he would be photographing for a catalog. When he arrived and saw all of the women, it looked like he wanted to run away. My wife finally arrived, and shortly after an altercation broke out. All of the women were yelling at the photographer for lying to them and telling them that they were the only ones he was with. My wife thought that as well. However, she was too busy fighting with me. She tried to blame me for invading her privacy and going through her emails, but I told her that I wanted a divorce and walked away. I went home and packed up all my things to go stay with my brother until I could find another place to stay permanently. But the divorce is currently underway, and it's looking like it's going to be pretty favorable toward me. Opie, first of all, I'm very sorry for what you had to go through. It's such a shame that somebody who you trusted so much would turn their back on you and betray you in such a way. The photographer seems like the classic sleazy photographer type, and it would have been beneficial to know that before your wife spent more time with them. From what it sounds like, he has no intention of even helping her with her career. He was just trying to sleep with her, and she did. I wouldn't be surprised if nothing came of that at all. Good on you for recognizing what was happening and ending it when you realized she was cheating. It's never easy to make that decision, but in the long run it's the right one. Now let's move on to our next story. We've been married for 8 years. We met in the workplace, and after my wife got pregnant for the first time, we decided that it would be best for our situation for her to stay home with the kids. It was a mutual decision because she didn't trust leaving the children with daycares or babysitters, and I made more than enough money to take care of all of us without her working. After our second child, we decided that we needed to upgrade our housing situation to accommodate our growing family. We were able to find a relatively decent priced house that fit our needs. Because at its cheap price, there was a lot of work that we needed to have done on it. I was busy with my full-time job, so I couldn't take over the project, so we ended up hiring a contractor. I left the decisions on who to hire to my wife, since she would be the one dealing with them most of the time, and honestly, as long as I had my office space in my home to my liking, I didn't really care much about what the rest of the house looked like. She hired a newer contractor who had recently graduated from a technical college with skills in electrical work, plumbing, and HVAC. It seemed like he was a well-rounded contractor that could take over quite a few areas that needed work in the house. He usually works during the day, so I never really saw him. He was gone by the time I got home from work around 6 p.m. One day when I had a headache at work and decided to come home a little bit early, I realized that he was quite good-looking. I hadn't known that he was an attractive man before I agreed to hire him. I wasn't jealous, but it made me a little bit uncomfortable knowing that there was this man in the house who my wife would have been crazy not to find attractive. I trusted her, so I didn't think she was going to do anything with the man. When I saw him for the first time, I joked with her about it, and she thought it was ridiculous. Whenever I would be home from work, she would tell me about everything that happened during the day, what the contractor had told her, and what they'd done. From the sounds of it, it seemed like they were generally out of each other's hair. One day there was a small fire in the office, and after the fire department came and put it out, our boss just had everybody go home early because of the strong smell left behind. I was so thankful to leave. It was a Friday and I was going to be getting a head start on the weekend, so I was thrilled. That feeling instantly vanished when I walked into my house and heard silence inside. My wife's car was in the driveway and the contractor's van was there too. I expected to hear noises of his working or at least some sign of my wife being there, but there was nothing. I had made it a habit not to yell for my wife when I got home to avoid the possibility of waking up our baby during their nap. So I walked through the house looking for my wife. When I made it to her bedroom, I heard the noise inside before I opened the door. There was a soft thudding noise, and every now and then I could hear stifled moaning. Right away I knew what I was going to be walking into if I opened the door. I braced myself for what I might see when I opened the door, then pushed it open. Of course my suspicions were confirmed when I saw the contractor in bed with my wife. They didn't even notice me right away. I yelled at them asking what was going on, and the contractor jumped away from my wife and she sat up trying to cover herself and telling me that it wasn't what it looked like. I couldn't understand how she could try to rationalize what I had just seen as being something else, but she was. I stormed out without saying a word or even bothering to listen to her excuses and checked myself into a hotel for the night. I spent about half of the night tossing and turning and trying to think of what my next steps would be. I had absolutely no desire to be with her ever again, but filing for divorce and saying I caught her cheating would only be my word against hers. She could easily lie and say that I was accusing her of something false. I needed proof. After doing some digging online, I learned that I could look at my detailed phone bill to see what calls and text messages had been sent out. Apparently, the providers keep records of all of that. The more I looked, the more I realized what happened with her and the contractor was not a one-time thing. They communicated quite often, and some of the text messages that they shared were very explicit. I saved that information so I could use it in our divorce filings, but I still felt like I needed to do something else to get revenge. I knew that if her parents found out about what she did, they would practically disown her. I was family to them, and knowing that their daughter cheated on her husband and stole a happy life away from her children would upset them. In the morning, I gave them a call and asked if I could come to dinner with them sometime soon because I was planning a surprise for my wife. All the while she was texting me and calling me nonstop, begging me to come home and telling me to think about the children, as if she was thinking about the children when she was cheating on me. I had dinner with her parents and her sister came along as well. While we were there, we caught up and they asked me why I gathered them all, and I told them about what happened. I showed them some of the tamer messages between her and the contractor, wanting to spare them the gory details of what their daughter was saying. They were appalled by her behavior. They called her later that night and told her how disappointed she was and how wrong she had been for throwing away a good marriage. I knew she felt badly too and she wanted to do what she could to fix it, but I wasn't going to hear that. I took the evidence that I had to my divorce attorney and started the filing. In the end, I let her keep the house that she and the contractor had built together, and I bought a new one for myself. I didn't have to pay any spousal support because she had violated the terms of our marriage, so she was forced to get a job. We now have joint custody of our kids, and we try to be amicable with each other so they aren't hurt. It's never easy realizing that your partner is being unfaithful, and it's especially more difficult when children are in the picture. What she did with the contractor was a breach of your union, and divorce was the only way out of it. However, I am glad that you two are able to be friendly with each other for your children's sake. It's very clear that she knew all along that what she was doing was wrong, but she either didn't care or wasn't strong enough to resist the temptation. I wish nothing but the best for you in the future and hope you can move on from here and be happy. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I, 46, became a brain surgeon while I was married to my wife, 40, for 20 years. I worked my way up from an intern as I went through school. Before I became a brain surgeon, my wife decided she didn't need to work. I didn't mind her being my spoiled trophy wife as long as she continued to respect me and give me what I need whenever I'm home from work. Living in Hawaii is glorious, don't get me wrong, but after living there my whole life, I started to become accustomed to beauty. I stopped going to the beach as often as we used to, and before I knew it, we stopped doing fun things basically altogether. Each time I got home from work, I was exhausted and didn't feel like doing much that same night. On the weekends, I was usually on call, so I wanted to keep prepared and close to the hospital. I wish my wife would have told me she was bored. I would have done something with her, and I did. When she unexpectedly told me, she found a party for us to go to. There was hula dancing and drinking. We did a little of both, and while we sat at the bar, I was sure we would have a deep conversation about where we were at in life, and what each other needed. Before I could start, I noticed she was on her phone. She would occasionally look around, but not to me. She was looking for someone. I asked her who she was looking for, but before she could lie, a man sat at the bar beside me. He introduced himself and started chit-chatting with me. His business was graphic design, and the hospital's contract with a boring graphic designer was just about to expire. I had mentioned it to my wife over a month ago, and I thought it was a strange coincidence that the party she wanted us to attend had a graphic designer that introduced himself to us. I shrugged it off. My wife watched us talk and get along well. She chimed in the conversation too, but the evening summed up to a pleasant time, and I told this man that I'd consider signing him for a contract with the hospital. I arranged for him to come to our house for dinner to talk business and review his work portfolio. When we went home after the party that night, my wife was so giggly and excited. She said she loved watching me do business and wished she could watch me do brain surgery. I said she wouldn't be able to handle it with her queasy stomach. At dinner, we ate, talked, and laughed. All three of us. My wife made a gourmet dinner, and we ate in the backyard by the fire pit in palm trees. While we had drinks afterward, I became extremely drowsy. More than usual, I knew I needed to get to bed, so I suddenly asked him to leave. He agreed graciously, and after he stepped out, I closed and locked the front door seconds before blacking out. I woke up in bed, with the alarm going off. My wife said I was completely out of it last night, as I crawled up the stairs. I guessed I drank too much, but that wasn't it. My wife knew why I was so drowsy, though. She just didn't tell me. She also didn't tell me what she did that very same night, while I was unconscious. Nights like this happened twice more. So on the third time, I decided not to drink the wine my wife always gave me. I was pretty concerned that I couldn't figure out why I kept getting so drowsy when I drank. I noticed at dinner how close my wife was getting to this man without me included. They created conversation amongst themselves well, like they didn't need or notice me. This gave me an idea. I decided to pretend I was still getting drowsy, like I needed to go to bed pretty fast. So I said goodnight and dismissed our guest, locking the door behind him. I kissed my wife goodnight quickly, and went upstairs to lay down. My wife didn't know if I drank the wine this time, so after 20 minutes, she peeked in the bedroom to make sure I was sleeping. I laid in bed, wide awake with eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. Around midnight, I thought I waited long enough to see what she was up to. That specific wine made me pass out suddenly, and my wife always wanted me to drink it. My heart was racing. I never snuck around my own house before. It felt like a bad dream, but when I tipped it to the closed and locked spare bedroom door, I knew I was doing the right thing. I started recording because I could hear my wife moaning. I wasn't there emotionally. I'm sure I would have been freaking out if I was, but I was so perplexed and mad, I was just glad to be recording. I bumped against the door, and in a few seconds, it opened. AP was staring at me, amused and worried. He knew he was in trouble. My wife was in bed, topless and worried. She was crying. After a moment's delay, she jumped up and stood by my side. Her eyes were full of desperation and, apparently, delusion because she tried telling me she would never do this to me, and that she loved me with all her heart. AP grabbed his stuff and left, but on his way out, I tricked him. As he got up, I told him he was no longer my business partner. My wife took this moment to say she wouldn't be able to face the world without me. This was like a window into her brain. She was realizing she wasn't going to have me by her side anymore, and she wouldn't live here. I told her she was crazy for letting herself betray me and refusing to think about the consequences until I walked in on her. She was bawling, and I said I knew this wasn't the only time they did it, either. I straightforwardly asked her if she was giving me a specific wine for a reason. Her jaw dropped and she said no, but I searched the cabinets and found the one in question. I smashed it outside. I noticed AP was gone, but he forgot something. While my wife was protesting, I called AP. I told him he forgot to take his sleazy, recently divorced woman with him. He said he was on his way. I turned to my wife and told her how disappointed I was that our life together was over. I said I never wanted to lose her, but she chose him and went so far as to make absolutely certain I wouldn't wake up and catch them, except she never expected me to turn down the wine. She had a hard time packing. She just kept crying in defeat and blaming herself for being so incredibly stupid. I didn't correct her or offer any support. This was her life now. It was hard for me too, but I knew I deserved much better. AP arrived to take my ex and all her stuff. She was miserable. It was clear she didn't want this anymore, but how could I know she lived so well? It turned out that losing her nice home and AP losing his business contract was harder to handle than they anticipated. Not only that, but living together just isn't the same or as exciting as sneaking it behind my back. AP kicked her out in less than 1 year. Of course, she tried to come back to me and maybe another man would have taken her back, but I was done. I spent 20 years of my life with her, only to be betrayed and forced to start over. It's not fair and I won't settle for it. Opie, I am so sorry your wife of 20 years betrayed you. It sounds like she was talking to AP even before the party all three of you attended. She must have been crazy to plan all this out and be so determined to give you one particular drink. If there was anything that needed to change in the relationship, she should have communicated that with you. There's no excuse for allowing another man into her life, especially not for going behind your back as you slept or worked. You were working to save lives while she went to great lengths to cheat on you. After being together for so long, she should have been smart enough to remain trustworthy. She deserved the misery she found to balance out all the undeserved care and love. I'm proud of you for discovering the truth and refusing to forgive her. Thank you for sharing this story. I wish you all the best going forward. Now let's get into our second story for today. While on a vacation to the Bahamas, my wife of 4 years fell head over heels for someone else. It was the last thing I expected to happen. We were both so stressed about our daily lives that I assumed a vacation together would be exactly what we needed to grow closer together. Instead, it was exactly what she needed to forget about me. Dolphins are her favorite animal and she always wanted to swim with them. That's what I arranged for her. We swam with the dolphins and while doing so, she fell for the dolphin trainer. He stayed pretty close to her, out of 10 people, and I saw him touch her sides a few times, all on the pretext of dolphining. AP was living in a paradise spending every day with her favorite animal, so when she looked at me, she saw a reminder of the boring life waiting for her back at home. Afterwards, I talked to her about it. I knew communication was the most important thing in relationships, even if it was going to be slightly awkward or upsetting. She told me she was jealous of him and wished she could be here every day around dolphins. I said life is the way it is, people don't get to choose the lives they have access to, but if she wanted to start pursuing this career, it wasn't too late. I woke up in the hotel room at 2 in the morning to find that she was gone. I was terrified. I checked outside and our rental car was gone. She didn't leave me a note, so I figured she was trying to be sneaky and planned to be back before I woke up. I checked our family locator app and got an Uber to the address it showed. It was a very tall apartment building, with a screen to look up the person you were trying to reach. I still had his name from the dolphin class, so I found his apartment number and buzzed. He answered it in a few moments, way faster than anyone sleeping with. I asked for my wife back and heard her voice in the background of the intercom. After a few moments, he said she was coming down. As soon as she got to me, she asked how I found her. I told her it wasn't important, but what was her finding a way back home without me? She gasped and I said I wasn't willing to pay for her way back to the US now, that she was cheating on me, and I didn't want her to be my wife either. She actually tried saying I wasn't being fair, that I should still care about her at least as a friend, even though she cheated on me. She asked how I could blame her if he's her dream guy. I told her I was a fool to believe she was my dream. I very angrily grabbed the rental keys out of her hand and got in. She nearly got her hand shut in the door from trying to stop me. I left her in the dust. Surprisingly, on the last day of vacation, I slept like a baby. I woke up to my ex calling me, because she couldn't get in the hotel with the extra locks done. She said this mistake was just one moment of weakness. She swore she regretted getting his number, and wished she just would have enjoyed the time she had with the dolphins, while looking to me as the man that made it happen. I said yup and hung up on her. I packed my stuff only, and walked out to the car. She was harassing me while I packed up, but I didn't let it faze me, and I didn't let her stop me from leaving. 2 months later, I'm back in the US, and already filed for divorce. My ex didn't have any close family, so I wasn't sure if she'd ever come back to the US. I was just wondering this when she called me. She was very sad, like all her life had been drained from her. It was so sweet and satisfying to turn her down. I reminded her that she gave me up. Even though I was the one that took her there so that we could grow closer, and she could ride the dolphins, she didn't think of me at all. She was a selfish cheater that didn't deserve to have me or my help. She fell for another man while I was right there by her side. She even had the nerve to call him her dream guy, so yeah, I was just doing American men a favor by keeping her away. Opie, I am so sorry you tried to do something nice for your wife by taking her on vacation, only for her to compare you to another man and actually choose him over you. You didn't deserve this, and I hope you know it wasn't your fault. I'm proud of you for everything you did. You found her, stood firm, took the keys, and got back to the US without her. After 4 years of marriage, she didn't deserve to have your care or love for another second. She should have been able to use some restraint and give you a little more respect. Just because she met a dolphin trainer doesn't mean you're suddenly less worthy of her affection. She's a terrible person, and I am glad karma served justice to her. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. After my wife, 35, and I, 37, had our first baby together, things started to go downhill. I worked full-time and occasionally worked late or had to bring work home with me. I'd still help with the baby as much as possible. My wife worked full-time too, but her job was way more laid back and had different hours. Her boss even let her bring the baby to work. Now that's a nice job. She told me I lost all the passion in our relationship and that I didn't give her the attention or love that she required. I tried explaining that my job required a lot of brainpower and I felt like any attention I'd offer her wouldn't be good enough anyway. Like her bar was set too high and by trying, I would prove I was a failure to her. This went on for some time and we eventually stopped talking for 3 weeks in a row. During that time, she went away to visit her older daughter from another marriage. While she was there, she tried telling me we need to talk and I said no thank you because I was so tired of always being in trouble with her and never being what she expected me to be. So our awkward silence continued even after I picked her up from the airport. We had an argument about it at home and sort of made it up, but even though we were talking again, it wasn't the same. She started getting really dressed up in some sexy outfits and just told me she was going out with friends/family. On the first time she went out, she didn't return until 6 a.m. I yelled and cussed at her for being so selfish and staying out that late when we had a baby to care for. I don't remember what her excuses were at that time, only that I was becoming increasingly suspicious of her behavior. Another time, I decided to surprise her and meet them at the restaurant when I was off work. When I got to the restaurant, no one I knew was there and when I called her, she said they decided to go somewhere else, but wouldn't tell me where. How odd. She went out a few more times before I put a tracker on her car. The next time she told me she was going to work, it didn't feel right to me, like she was too happy. Something told me to discreetly take her house key back before she left, so I did. After a few hours, I tried calling her several times with no response. She finally returned my call, but it sounded like she was in bathroom. I asked her where she was and she said she was at work. I checked the GPS and it said she was in hotel. I was seeing red as I drove to the hotel and found her car parked in front. I waited about 15 minutes until she came out with some guy. I got close and snapped some really good pictures on my phone. Then I got up in their faces and screamed at them, calling her several names. You don't sleep with someone until divorce papers are presented, and we never discussed that. She said she had been telling me for over a year and a half at that point that I needed to be more attentive and invested in her. Since I hadn't been, she considered herself single. I told her the world doesn't revolve around her every need and desire for attention. It would have been easier for me to show her love if I didn't feel like I was going to fail her unrealistic expectations. Then I looked at her lover. He was standing there sheepishly, probably praying I didn't recognize him, but I did. I spat at him and screamed, asking how long he thought it would take for him to find a new job. He was my wife's boss. As he stood there dumbfounded, I snapped one more picture of him and my wife. I asked them what they thought the company's course of action would be upon being informed about their affair. They shook their heads and looked down, visibly ashamed. I know this was an involuntary response. As I walked back to my car, they both tried telling me to stop and think things through. That was a laugh. I drove to their office and it didn't take long for me to have a special meeting with her boss's boss. He didn't find it so amusing that they'd both called off that day claiming to be sick. He decided to fire both of them. First, he called my wife, and as I sat there, I really enjoyed hearing her squeal and freak out on the other line. On the way to file for divorce, my wife called me in a screaming panic, saying I needed to stop acting so rashly and think before sabotaging her reputation. I asked her if she ever stopped for 1 second and thought about what I needed or how I felt. She was quiet. I hung up and used my phone to post pictures of her and her boss on Facebook. My phone started blowing up with questions from her friends, family, and colleagues. She tried calling me again several times. After I got the divorce papers, I returned home to find her looking for her house key. She immediately started crying to me, saying she had nowhere to stay. She thought she'd be able to stay with someone, friend, family, colleague, but all of them were so disappointed by her actions that she was cut off. Only because I wasn't purely evil, I arranged for her to sleep in our garage while I slept inside the house with our baby. In exchange for this, she had to find a job and start paying me rent. So just like that, she went from living in a payment-free house, having a job, supportive family, friends, and husband to nothing. At first, she struggled to find a job and was forced to sell some of her expensive treasures, most of them gifts for me, to afford the rent. She eventually found a job that she hated but kept going because she had no other options. When the divorce was finalized, she was told she had 30 days to find her own place. She moved into a trailer and continued working her sucky job while she got visitation with our daughter. She actually seems remorseful now for demanding and expecting so much from me. She understands how hard life is when you have a job that doesn't cater to your needs and an unappreciative, or in her case, non-existent, spouse. Wow, OP. Thank you so much for sharing your story. There's many valuable things for people to learn from it. Spouses must be selfless and consider what their spouse needs or wants more than their own desires. When two people do this for each other, it turns into a beautiful partnership. I think you handled this in such a way that showed her what she did wrong and gave her the karma she deserved. She knew what she was doing when she went behind your back. If she considered herself single, she should have filed for divorce instead of starting an affair with her boss. Now for today's second story. My wife, 37, of 5 years, suddenly had a dramatic increase in her sex drive and I, 33, loved it. Trust me when I say that I took every opportunity one could to help her out. I worked full-time and she attended classes at college part-time. One day, while I was at work, my wife sent me pictures of a puddle of water and a leak that started in the house. I told her to call a friend of mine that was a plumber since I was busy at work. I didn't hear anything for hours but didn't notice because I was really busy. When I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see his car was still there. I entered the house and he was walking down the stairs, followed by my wife. They both looked extremely cheeky and pleased with themselves the second before they saw me. That's when my wife lost color in her skin and started stammering. I cut her off to ask where the leak was because I thought it had been in the kitchen. My friend told me while he was there he wanted to check for leaks upstairs as well. It made sense enough that I let him leave, but my wife started acting super weird. That night, she didn't feel frisky, which was really unlike her. During the next 2 weeks, she was more distant than usual and snapped at me when I asked who she was texting so much. She added a password on her phone and didn't want to come with me to a family reunion. Well, I'm no dummy and I decided to confront my friend the plumber. I arranged to meet him for lunch at a diner on my work break. I don't think I anticipated how horrible I'd feel after this because I didn't return to work. When we sat down, he was super nervous even though we usually met for meals to catch up every once in a while. I decided to pretend I already knew whatever it was he was so nervous about me finding out. When I said I knew what happened and just needed to hear it from him, I started recording on my phone. He was terrified. He started looking around, breathing heavily, like he wasn't sure if I was going to lunge at his throat. He told me what happened that day. He fixed the leak while my wife hovered close by, wearing nothing but a short nightdress. She asked him a lot of questions, which eventually led to inviting him to check out a potential leak upstairs. When they got up there, she undressed completely and laid on our bed. She asked him to inspect her and he couldn't resist. His head dropped onto the table, sobbing so loudly that other people in the diner stared at us. I left immediately. From what he was telling me, this was my wife's scheme of seduction. I was still really pissed at him, but I couldn't risk having charges pressed against me for beating him up, and karma would begin as soon as he lost his job. I returned home to find my wife enjoying the luxury of a house I provided for her while she did homework for schooling that I paid for. Her life was about to drastically change. Since I bought it, I took her laptop and smashed it right in front of her. She screamed and asked why I did that and what was going on. I told her that since she seduced and fucked my friend and her plumber, she wasn't going to be my wife or live here anymore. She immediately started sobbing because she knew she was caught. She tried apologizing, saying she messed up and wouldn't ever do it again. I told her I wasn't a blindly trusting idiot and that she broke her wedding vows to me, which can't be forgiven or repaired. I needed a wife I could trust to be in her home without me, and that wasn't her anymore. She sobbed and begged while I dumped all her stuff on our yard and porch. She called her best friend for help. When she arrived, my wife told her what was going on, and once she heard the story, she decided she didn't want to help my wife and left. Her friend knew what a good husband I was and that she was a damn fool. This woman was going to become a dependent to whoever elected to help her, so my wife called a classmate she didn't know very well, begging for help. This poor girl would become the sucker. After she helped my cheating wife get all her stuff into her car, she took her back to her small apartment and my wife started leeching off of her. Meanwhile, I filed for divorce and stopped paying for her schooling. Of course, as soon as she was dropped from the program, she left voicemails on my phone, a majority of which were inaudible. She was extremely upset and her life was crumbling all around her. She told me she didn't know how she was going to survive anymore. All I could think was good. I wasn't sure if it made me evil, but it did make me proud of myself. I didn't lose my cool beyond what I was entitled to and filed for divorce without hesitation. I knew I couldn't trust her the same way ever again. Eventually, the poor girl my wife leeched off of for many months had enough. She kicked her out the same way I did, by leaving all her stuff outside. Hilarious. Ever since then, my now ex-wife has been sleeping on people's couches, and each time she moves unexpectedly, she loses more of her belongings. I guess it's a struggle to find a car or job without a stable place to live. Maybe she's learned her lesson and won't cheat on anyone ever again. Wow, OP. That is a terrible thing to have to go through. I am so sorry she chose to you like this. You trusted her to remain loyal, but she betrayed you by seducing a man you trusted and allowed in your home. What she did was inconceivable, and she certainly did not deserve to have you paying for her schooling or providing her a home. I believe you made the right decision to divorce her. Trust is hard enough to build between two people, but even harder after a betrayal like this. Because you made the harder decision to divorce, you have a chance to heal and build trust with someone else. The events of that fateful day will fade into a foggy memory, but your new life and love will be prominent in your everyday life. I wish you exactly that, a life full of unconditional and untainted love. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening,